Hello, everybody. This is Rob Fredette with the podcast HODGEPOD, and we're going to be talking a little NASCAR racing in general. I have a special guest tonight, Zack Brown of the ZB's Horsepower Talk podcast, which premieres, I'll let him tell you, this week, January 6th. Is that correct, Zack?
Yes, the season 2 premiere, getting a kickstarted this Saturday live.
All right. Well, welcome to my podcast. And what is your podcast about, and how did you get to conceive it? And we'll talk a little bit of NASCAR as well, and maybe some football.
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate you having me on.
Sure.
I started this racing podcast primarily because my grandfather is in the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame, and I wanted to have something out there with him primarily to he doesn't do a lot of stuff with media, as you can probably understand. He's 89 years old. He doesn't like to talk to media like that, but he loves to talk to his grandchildren. So I wanted to have something out there where he basically would be immortalized, and you could see it. You can go back and just see just how his mind works, what he's done throughout the years. He's been in racing community since the early 1950s. So that was what I wanted to start the podcast primarily on. And from there, it kind of branched off where I kind of discuss the weekly roundup of all the racing action that happened in NASCAR, sprint car racing, which is dirt racing, World of Outlaws, if people aren't too familiar, drag racing, and we also touch on IndyCar series and some other small series here and there too. And I've brought my dad on, who's a former crew chief in the sprint car community. So he's able to give me that perspective of things. So we're able to bounce off of each other, and it's worked pretty well.
So what do you got in store for your season premiering in a few days?
So, yes, we're doing a live premiere. We don't always do live shows. I wanted to do something pretty cool and unique to kick off the season. Because the official NASCAR season doesn't start until February, but there's some smaller dirt racing. There's actually a crown jewel in the dirt racing community called the Chili Bowl coming up, starts next Monday. Mm-hmm. What I wanted to do is get the season 2 premiere started right before that, because we like to do a little bit of insights for that big time race. And we're able to do, very fortunate that we have a couple special guests joining us live on those. One of the guests is a National Sprint Car Hall of Fame sprint car driver, Lance DeWeese. He's worked with my dad. He's worked with my grandpa over the years. Very tremendous race car driver, and just a tremendous guy overall. He's been on the show before, had a great interview, so be excited to see what he's got in store for a Saturday. And we also have an up-and-coming race car driver in the NASCAR side of things, Caleb Costner. He is a former law enforcement officer turned race car driver. He's fulfilling his dreams and making things work and getting a lot of opportunities to race at big tracks. He's got Daytona coming up in the ARCA Racing Series, which is almost like the semi-pro version of NASCAR, if you will. And he's also gotten some opportunities in the Craftsman Truck Series as well. So excited for him, and excited for him to be on as well.
That's interesting, because you just mentioned Daytona. That's around the corner in February. So what race car drivers are some of the favorites to win the NASCAR Cup Series?
Well, for the championship favorites every year, you always have to look at a guy that's never won a championship, but he's always in it in the playoffs that they have, is Denny Hamlin. That's one guy that every single year you think he might get it, but he always falls short. But you can only fall short for so many times until you finally break through. So that's one to definitely look for. My favorite driver that I followed since he started is Kyle Larson. He's the 2021 NASCAR Cup champion. He's always a favorite going in. You've got the fan favorite, Chase Elliott, as always, to look at that. And, of course, the defending series champion, Ryan Blaney. So all of those drivers are definitely up there to win the championship this year. And the Daytona 500 is only 48 days away, and that is the crown jewel in NASCAR.
That's a heck of a race to start out, the crown jewel, the first race of the year. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, yes, it's literally the Super Bowl of NASCAR racing, and they do that as their season kicks off. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, before we started talking, I just briefly told you I used to work in the food business, and I used to travel, and I went to a couple of motor speedways back in 2016. Charlotte Motor Speedway did the Coca-Cola 600, and I was there for about 10 days. It was really an eye-opening experience for me because they start early in the morning. They're opening the gates for the race at night, and they have not just one race, but they have races during the week leading up to the big race. So explain that like Charlotte Motor Speedway. That is a massive racetrack. Yes,
and unfortunately, over the last decade and a half, they've gotten rid of approximately half of their seating. They went from around 100,000 seats to 50,000 just because the crowds just weren't as drawn. But the NASCAR numbers have gradually improved over the last few years since COVID. So I think everybody being cooped up inside and finally getting back out, they're like, well, we really missed this. So let's get back to it. And Charlotte, I've seen it personally. It's the jurisdiction I work in. And I get to see all sorts of people there come in from all around the country. People will start usually Monday or Tuesday in the camping sites if they are there that early. And they're, I've seen people as far from like Canada and England and things like that. And the Coca-Cola 600 is another crown jewel race. Used to be called the World 600 a long time ago. And it's the longest duration race that NASCAR has, 600 miles as opposed to the usual 500 miles. Usually takes around 4.5 to 5 hours to run that race. So you get to see the endurance and how much these drivers are actually in shape and everything. People don't think about that, but it's usually pretty hot in Charlotte around that time. So those cars are at least 100 degrees, 110 degrees inside the entire race. And that just tests their mental and physical capabilities during that race. So that's very interesting to see how that goes because it's 400 laps, if anybody was wondering. That's a lot of left turns. And and you were mentioning they have races throughout leading up. And they used to have the All-Star race, which was the week before. Now they've kind of moved the All-Star race around every so often. It's actually in North Wilkesboro again this year. But the races that lead up to it, you do have the ARCA race, which I was mentioning that my guest coming on, Caleb Costner, he raced in it last year, which that goes right before the Craftsman Truck race. Then that race is run at Friday night and Memorial Day weekend. And that's one of the cool traditions about NASCAR. Coke 600, always Memorial Day weekend. And the next series is called the Xfinity Series, which is one step below the NASCAR Cup Series. They race on Saturday in the afternoon. And then the Cup Series, they race their big race on Sunday.
Yeah, I remember doing the race for the Coca-Cola 600. I remember we were on golf carts, and I remember you drive underneath the tunnel, and there was a convenience store, if I'm not mistaken, inside that where all the drivers are, with their trailers and things of that nature. But there was a convenience store inside the infield, I guess they call it, right? And it was a pretty busy C store, as I would remember. During that weekend. But
yes, it's a little Circle K convenience store in there, people to get some snacks. And
that's incredible.
Of course, you're obviously beer and stuff to get that.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was extremely busy in that C store. I had to go in there a couple times to get a soda as well. And Martin Truex Jr. won that race in 2016. And I remember that race. It was very hot. So another racetrack I've been to was that later that year was the New Hampshire Speedway up in Loudon, New Hampshire. Kevin Harvick won the Bad Boy Off-Road 300. So that was a little bit different track. It was in the fall, but still it was cool. And I remember that track being flat, a little bit flatter than Charlotte. So, but what are some of the keys like Bristol here in East Tennessee? That's a short track as well. So what distinguishes the tracks? The drivers, are there certain drivers who perform better on longer tracks or shorter tracks?
Yes, they're definitely, and there's also road course tracks that they have as well, and they've actually expanded the road course races, which was right and left turns. And for people that aren't familiar with road course tracks, if you look up any of the Formula One races, they generally race on road course tracks. So NASCAR, they try to branch off and bring in a little bit more of a diverse audience, so that's why they race a lot of these road course tracks. I'm not the biggest fan of them. I feel like they traditionally always had two. I think two on the schedule was fine. But yes, there's Talladega, which is the largest oval that NASCAR races at. It's 2.66 miles.
2.6.
So if you want to see how big a track is, go see that. It is a massive, massive place. And I take for granted how big Charlotte is, and you see it's like, oh yeah, that's a big track. You don't understand until you go to that big Talladega track in Alabama. So what that is, that's called speedway racing. It used to be called restrictor plate racing, and that's where they have pack racing, and they're drafting off of one another. They are inches from touching each other and spinning each other out. That's why you see serious, humongous crashes happen between Talladega and Daytona. That's the two main pack racing tracks is what they call them. You have Bristol. And yes, there's drivers that definitely perform better at short tracks. You were mentioning Martin Truex Jr. He's phenomenal at a lot of short tracks. Bristol, he's pretty good at, but he's really good at Dover, which is his home track, which is a mile. It's kind of similar to Bristol, high banking concrete track. And Martinsville, little paperclip, flat track. Martin Truex Jr. has performed very well there. They call it Martinsville for him, and they emphasize the Martin for him. Which is early in his career, he didn't have the best luck on short track racing, and he eventually adapted and got really good at it. But yeah, there's drivers that are specifically good at pack racing, especially that's where Talladega and Daytona, you have your opportunity as a small team, a one-car team that's not a high budget like Hendrick Motorsports or Joe Gibbs or anything like that. You have your shot to win that because anybody can win those races. And a small team won the Daytona 500 last year, one-car team. So that was actually really cool to see.
Interesting. You know, you mentioned Bristol back in 2016. I also worked the Battle of Bristol there between Tennessee and Virginia Tech, the football game. They had 156,000 people there for the game. I remember I was in the middle of the week. I wanted to walk up the incline there of the track there. It looked easy to do, but when you walk up that track, I think it's at a 45-degree angle. It was very difficult.
Yeah, it's incredible how much banking there is. Nobody realizes until you're actually on, and you can't really walk on it. It's pretty crazy.
I had to get a picture there too, so I kind of like that. Sat in the middle of the track. I thought that was neat. So yeah, I couldn't believe how small that track was. I mean, that fits a lot of people in that little area there.
Yeah, they call it the last great Coliseum.
That is correct. And I have my little mug here from the game there.
There you go.
I keep my pens. I bought a lot of swag there when I worked it, so it was fun.
Of course.
Yeah. What about talk about more about your podcast? So how do you get guests, and how do you do your podcast for a week of racing? Do you get certain angles, or how do you go about getting your concept for each podcast episode?
So it's something we kind of adapted throughout the year, how I wanted to figure out. This is the first year I've done it, and I do it as a hobby, of course. And I wanted to figure out what's the best way to do it. And we got to the point where it's best to get an episode released midweek, and we occasionally will have that special guest, and we'll periodically have those bonus episodes, and that's a separate episode that's released at the end of the week. And so what we do for our main podcast is we talk about we'll make notes and watch the racing and watch highlights if we can of different series that happen. It's hard to catch everything, so there's a good thing for YouTube and things like that. You can go back and watch highlights of those races. And so we always start off talking about the NASCAR races because that is the highest sought after and watched motorsport in the world. And then we go into dirt racing, where we're both really familiar with, my dad and I. Talk about what we saw. We do all the recaps and whatever happened that weekend. So drag racing as well, and IndyCar. They don't race as often as NASCAR, so that helps when they're off, and we can kind of we can just focus on these. And then we'll give a preview of the tracks coming up, what we think we could see happen, and what the drivers and crews really need to do to get their car set up and have the best chance to win at those tracks. And for the guest purposes, to get the guests, I'm fortunate that I know a lot of people that from the dirt racing community that knew my grandpa, know my dad, and social media is very easy to reach out to people, especially on Twitter or X, Elon Musk's social media device, whatever you want to call it. And you can just send messages to people. Yeah. And that's how I got a lot of guests too. I sent direct messages to certain people, such as the general manager of South Boston Speedway in Virginia. That's one of our awesome guest interviews. And I mean, how often do you get a general manager of a race car track? So, and then he was like, yeah, I'll come on. I don't care. That's really cool when people get to do that. And also with my job, we have a lot of racing that comes to our area. Like I said, Charlotte Motor Speedway. May or may not talk to them about the podcast. Just casually sneak it in there if I'm talking to certain people of in the NASCAR community or drag racing community. So a little bit of everything. And like I said, it just social media is so easy to get your word out there now. So that's been the biggest tool to get guests, and it's been fun.
How long did it take you to get into the podcast that you wanted to do? Because when I started this one here, I went back and forth for 3 years. And then I said, heck, I'm going to go with it. So how did you go about? Did you go into it right away, or did you think about it, plan for it?
Yeah, it was something I thought about, and like I said, my big thing was just seeing that there's nothing out there with my grandfather for interviews, because he does not like media. And I'm like, well, I want to do something with him, but I'm like, I can't just do a simple just interview or something. And then that's it. And it was something I thought about, and I'm like, why not do it? Everybody seems to be doing podcasts now. Let's have at it. See what happens. I know, like 2 or 3 different sports. That's pretty much it. Like I mentioned before, or you mentioned, I'm a cop in North Carolina, so a lot of cops, they golf on their downtime. Well, I can't golf, but I can talk about racing and football and things like that.
Interesting. Well, you said football. I'm a Patriots fan, and you are a Eagles fan. Is that correct?
Yeah. We both don't really need to talk about what's been happening this year. So
you know what?
I guess we could dwell on the past.
Yeah, I know. You know what I can't believe is that the Patriots. I can't believe the stuff I'm hearing on the news that Bill Belichick. They want to get rid of him, or he won't be there next year. And I find that hard to believe. He won 6 Super Bowls, went to 9 Super Bowls. The thought of even having him not there is just not conceivable to me. I'm not a member of the media. I'm just an average Joe. But you know what? I think it's really bad that the way he's being treated.
Well, as a Patriots fan, let me ask you real quick, what is the general consensus with all the Patriots fans that you're seeing? Because I've heard maybe 50-50. Yes, we still want them, and no, we need to move on and get somebody younger.
Well, I listen to the games if they're not on TV. I didn't get the YouTube package. I listened to the Patriots radio on Sirius XM, and then I listened to the postgame show after each game from one of the radio stations. And people are like 80, in my opinion, 80-20 to get rid of them. And I said, what team are you guys watching? I mean, I can't believe people are talking about, get rid of him. Time is past. What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. 6 Super Bowls. But, it's 50-50, I think, now, because they're starting to play better. Unfortunately, Mac Jones was, in my opinion, 3 offensive coordinators not getting, I guess, some continuity for his play. So I kind of feel bad for Mac Jones because he came from Alabama, and I still think he has a future with the Patriots, but I don't know if the front office does. But, the Patriot fans are very passionate like other fans. I grew up there, and I remember the days when you could go to a Patriots game early, pay for a ticket, go walk up, buy a ticket, and they were getting 30 to 40,000 a game. So if fans want that, that's fine. But I would stick with Belichick.
Yeah, and I actually have a football podcast, but that's exclusively on YouTube. And I actually am going to release an episode here shortly for it. Basically, I just give kind of a quick rundown of games coming up, what I'm thinking might be the best bets, if you will, for the game. I don't bet on them because I would lose, but it's also just fun to talk about. But and I've said it before. if Belichick leaves, and I don't think anybody knows besides Belichick and Robert Kraft. I don't think anybody knows. People can speculate all they want. I don't, and Belichick's not one that lets things in the media release. If he leaves, it's not going to be because he's fired. It's going to be because they mutually part ways. But they have a high draft pick. They can get a franchise quarterback. Give Belichick a year-to-year deal right now. See how he develops the quarterback. The defense has been really good for the Patriots. People don't realize that. They've been fantastic. That's all Belichick there. So, and I don't know how you go about finding the right offensive coordinator because obviously Bill O'Brien was not it. He's had success with Brady in the past, but I mean, come on, it was Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those. As an Eagles fan and just kind of outside looking in, you'd be stupid to get rid of Belichick. And you hear the NFL players too, like the Kelsey podcast, New Heights. They're players. They talk about it. They're like, how do you think he's not a good coach? That's just ridiculous to them. And he's like, and Jason was like, it's ridiculous they're even thinking about him going somewhere else. So. I'm kind of with you. I think the Patriots still should keep him because it's not all on him. Maybe you could relinquish some of the GM duties and get somebody to help him out with the GM and have him just focus on the coaching because maybe he is a little bit in over his head with the GM part of it. But he is the greatest coach and GM of all time, and he's got 6 Super Bowls. Yeah. Nobody else can say that. So.
Yeah, I mean, the thought, and the beat writers, they do their job and they have their sources, but the thought of even. It was decided after a game when they played the Colts in Germany that it was it. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, let the season play out. Fans are just pretty intense, I guess. I think they should stick with them, but
Shoot, you're telling me intense fans. I'm an Eagles fan.
Yeah, and the Eagles. What happened to them this weekend with the Cardinals? My goodness.
Yeah, you don't. We don't need to get into all that. No, and. Watching all the games this year, and you see the issues that they've had. They've never fixed any of the issues, but the more people the better records that you have, the more people are going to keep watching you. And there's issues that have never gotten fixed, and their secondary has been really bad, and they've got no pressure. It's very clear the defensive coordinator, both of them that they had this year now, Desai and pencil beard dude. Don't know why he has a pencil. I mean, he did great for y'all up there, but it's hard to change.
Matt Patricia.
Yeah. I'm not gonna. I have nicknames for all the coaches right now, and they're not really very PG. But you can argue that a lot of the coaches have lost the locker room. You can see AJ Brown's not happy, and my fear is that. AJ Brown's turning into a TO situation that they had back in 2005 with the Eagles. I hope that's not the case. They let the division go. I mean, if somehow the Cowboys lose to Washington this week, I'll be shocked. But the Eagles lost the division this week, and that's I thought at least they could at least win the division. I didn't think they were going to get number one, but it's just not a team that you really want to see in the playoffs because I don't think they can really beat anybody right now. They're down on themselves. They're kind of lost in their own way. I really don't. There's no fix for it. They'll give Sirianni another year, but I see it trending kind of how it was with Doug Peterson. This is kind of beginning of the end.
Really?
And Jeffrey Lurie and Harry Roseman are not very patient to give coaches more than 3 seasons. So.
Well, I remember last year they were hitting on all cylinders on their way to the Super Bowl, and this year I think they went 9-1, and they were just like close games.
10-1, yep.
Yeah, 10-1, and they were just. They weren't playing well, but they were still winning, and I thought, man, these guys are resilient. And then they've hit a little wall here the last few weeks of the last second half of the season, but I still think that the Eagles will be the team to beat in the playoffs. I really do. I think they'll beat the 49ers.
It's an uphill climb. Their first game likely will be against Tampa and down in Tampa. And historically, they don't play the best down there. Last time they went to Tampa, they played Tom Brady and I mean, you're not going to beat Tom at home anytime, especially in the playoffs. No, I don't know. It's just we'll see. At least I've gotten to see a Super Bowl in my lifetime. I'd like to have my kids be able to see a Super Bowl in their lifetime. And we thought it was going to happen in February, but that didn't happen. So we don't need to get into that either. So, yeah, it's just
Well, one more thing on the Patriots. From like 89 to 92, I think they won 14 games. They had horrible seasons. They won 14 games in 4 or 5 years. So ever since Belichick and obviously Bill Parcells before him got there, it's been a different mindset there. So I hope they keep Belichick. That's just my opinion. I think they're crazy if they let him go, but that's me.
It'll be a crazy offseason for sure.
It will.
I think we say that every offseason, but it'll be very interesting. I think you'll see about 6 to 7 new head coaches this offseason. So
yeah, it's a harsh business. It is a harsh business. So let's get back to your podcast. So you have a live episode coming up this weekend, January 6th. So where can you hear your podcast or your live stream?
Yes. So for the live portion, that will all be premiering. And I actually had to do a practice run today, make sure it's all working properly, and then I'll have too many technical difficulties during it. YouTube is of course the main place to view it. ZB Media Productions is a YouTube channel for anybody listening. In the same Facebook page as well, ZB Media Productions on Facebook will be premiering that as well. Same name again for Twitch, because it said, hey, you can stream on Twitch if you want. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. Just why not? And also Elon Musk's X social media thing, that would also be on there as well. And that is through my handle at TheRealZB93. And so whenever it gets once that finishes up, I'll obviously have to edit it out a little bit, but the audio versions of it will be releasing anywhere you can listen to your podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, anywhere you get them. That'll release as well, and that's where you can also follow all of the episodes. If you're just driving to work or and want to listen to something, that's what I do. I pop on a podcast while at work, because music kind of gets old after a while.
Getting back to the NASCAR season this year, who were the top drivers this year to win it all? I know we talked earlier, Denny Hamlin has not won, but who would you suspect would be the favorites going into 2024?
Yeah, you have to get used to saying that new year, and that'll take some time, just like it always is. Of course, you can never count out really any of the Hendrick Motorsports drivers. Their equipment's just phenomenal. They're just notorious for having great cars, great crews, and it's not just a driver, it's a team. It takes a team to win. Kyle Larson won a championship because his team got him out of pit road before anybody else. Kyle Larson, of course, that's definitely a favorite in my opinion. He runs strong every single year. I think he won 5 races this past year, and the year before he won 10. So it's you can never count him out. Definitely got to look at the defending champion, Ryan Blaney. The momentum you carry from winning a championship, that won't go unnoticed. They'll be firing on all cylinders. They've got the same crew back. That's definitely a favorite. It's a long season though, so anything can change, but you got to look at the more experienced drivers. Of course, Martin Truex Jr. could be his last year racing. I think it's on his final year. They redid it for a 1-year contract, I believe. So maybe he goes out with another championship. That's one you've also got to look out for too. And one driver I'm really looking at, who's really turned around this organization. He actually became a part owner of Roush Motorsports, which turned to Roush Fenway. Now it's Roush Fenway Keselowski, Brad Keselowski. The improvement they've made from year to year since he's been there, that has been incredible, because those cars were just complete junk. They were running maybe mid-pack at best, week in and week out. Now you see them consistently getting top 10s, top 5s, and his other car he owns, Chris Buescher, he was able to get a couple wins this year. I think you'll see Brad Keselowski get a couple wins this year, and I think you'll see him be contending for the championship. But I don't want to release too much because I always do
save it for the
once right before the Daytona 500. That episode, my dad and I will give our predictions for who we think will be in the Final Four. And of course, you got to always can't count out Rowdy Kyle Busch, one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah. One thing that I just saw something on Twitter yesterday, and it was Dale Earnhardt before his fatal crash in 2001, and he was interviewed before then. What's fascinating to me is like how calm the drivers are. It's like us going to work. They were just sitting there, and how calm they are when they're interviewed. I'd be like jumping off the walls, getting in a car going 200 miles an hour. How do they stay so calm?
This is what they've done their entire lives. A lot of these drivers, they've done it since they were 4 years old, racing something, whether it's go-karts or you go to your little local small dirt tracks and race there. I'm sure they get nervous. They've gotten to the point where they're good at hiding their emotions. Like you see with any professional athlete, you won't see them really say too much to notice that they're nervous before a game. Now you'll probably see a lot of anxiety for these drivers for the Daytona 500, just because that is the biggest race, and that's how you start off a year. That's what can propel you to have a great year. If you're a smaller team and you win the Daytona 500, that is a humongous purse. I think it's up to $2.5 million to win it or something. That goes a long way for a very small team. It's just years and years of constant racing. You'll see now if you go tune into some of the rookies, you'll see some anxious eyes in those interviews for sure. But the veterans, it's just what they do. It's their job. It's their career. They're just used to it.
Who was the driver? Was it Ryan Blaney or somebody else that was in that horrific crash? It was the car that flipped over. I don't know how many times.
Yes.
Who was that?
Yes, that was Ryan Preece. He races for Tony Stewart in the NASCAR Cup Series. Yeah, and that was as much improvements that NASCAR makes to these cars to make sure they don't go airborne and they don't flip. Things happen.
Wow.
What happened? It kind of caught. I think it was some sort of dip that was in the grass between the grass and pavement. It kind of just caught it at the perfect angle to do all that damage. So if anybody wants to check that out, go check out Ryan Preece's crash from Daytona from last year. One of the scariest crashes you'll ever see. And he came out of it with just some bruises. He raced the next week. And that's a testament to the safety that NASCAR has done for these cars. They make sure these drivers have everything they need to make sure they walk away from all those crashes.
Wow. So talk about before we wrap up here about your podcast again, when it's streaming, and how often you can hear it for the upcoming racing season.
So we'll do the live stream January 6th. We'll take a break the following week. This will kind of count as the first episode, but you'll generally find them depending on how my schedule at work goes. Usually in the middle, usually it releases Tuesdays or Wednesdays during the racing season. Actually, in racing season is pretty much the whole year. So we'll get it back up and running, whatever the next Wednesday after next week is. I don't even know my dates right now. So that's probably, you got calendar. I believe it's, the 17th. Wednesday the 17th should be the next regular episode that we have. And we're kind of branching off into having some more fun segments, and I'm not going to reveal too much right now. Right. We'll have some miscellaneous segments that kind of tie into racing, and it makes it fun for the audience to think about too. So a lot of improvements for this year. Excited to see what we can do and how we can bring in some more viewers and keep this thing going, because it's something we enjoy doing, and gets away from reality for a little bit.
Absolutely. You know, I know the whole part about work and life get in the way. I want to get my podcast episode going, and sometimes just there's a halt. But 2024, my goal is to get more episodes out and streamline it a little bit more. So Zack Brown from the ZB's Horsepower Talk podcast has joined me. And Zack, thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully you can come back on again maybe before the Daytona.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you having me.
All right. Thank you so much.